Welcome back to my full body routine. We're kicking off with the B split today. So we're starting off with the hammer press. This chest press machine, it's basically an incline press, but it starts off horizontal and then kind of arcs up till your hands are well above your head. It's a good little machine because it's isolateral. So because I'm coming off an injury, it's really important for me to pick exercises that allow my weak and injured hand to come up to speed with my strong dominant hand on the left. If I pick something like a barbell bench press, you would find that my strong hand on the left would just take over. I'd end up with a big jacked chest and shoulders and triceps on one side, and my weak side would lag behind. So coming off an injury, this is a really good strategy to employ. And in general, you should have some isolateral work, especially if you've got an A and B split, just to keep things even so that your weak hand doesn't fall behind your strong hand. So a slow and controlled technique here, using a 4-4 cadence. I don't really pause at the top here. I try to keep a pretty exaggerated bend in the elbow, and that'll keep focus on the chest and off the triceps. If you lock those triceps out, lock the elbows out, often I find you can risk damaging that sort of sensitive joint if you end up hyperextending, and it also shifts things off the chest and onto the triceps. So you just got to make a judgment call there. So I've approached failure, and I just keep trying to grind out a partial rep, but it doesn't go so well. But that's how you know you've truly taken the set as far as you can. So we're kicking off our second exercise for the B split, which is the hammer iso row. Again, it's isolateral, so you can work the limbs independently. And so all those benefits I talked about in the first exercise will apply again here. So I'm not using straps like I mentioned last week, so that my weak right injured hand can come up to speed. And then once I feel that I've taken my grip as far as I can, I'll probably chuck some straps on, because I'm capable of lifting, I think, a fair bit more weight than I am currently. So the cadence is 4-2-4. That's 4 seconds to grind the weight up, 2 seconds to really squeeze the weight and make sure I draw the scapula down and back to get those delicate back muscles working, and then 4 seconds to lower the weight down. When I originally did the full body routine a few weeks ago when I started, I didn't have an A and B split, so I was doing both a pull down and a row movement. But I found that the first exercise would always compromise the second. So if I improved on the first exercise, typically I would trend backwards or just hold steady on the second exercise because of the overlap. So what I did when going to an A to B split was break up the horizontal and the vertical movements, so that I do the reverse grip pull down one week, I do this iso row the second week, and I found that they started to both progress without the ability of one to affect the other. So when you're designing a workout routine, if you want to pick different exercises, to me, think about what you're trying to achieve and how exercises affect others. I found that by splitting up the vertical and horizontal back movements, I've basically been able to create a really good workaround for getting overall development in the back, but also being efficient. So as you can see, I've sort of ground out my last rep there, squeezing as hard as I can, lowering it under control. I'm going to employ something called the rest pause technique. So basically I'll have a couple of breaths, 5 or 6 breaths, and then I'll hop in again and try and get as many reps as I can get. So it'll probably only be 1 or 2 reps, which is pretty typical. If you find yourself, getting 4 or 5 reps, there's a good chance you're not taking that first part of the set to failure. So that's a really good way to kind of diagnose whether you're training to failure properly based on how your rest pause reps present themselves. Moving on to shoulder training. So I'm just using a pretty generic life fitness machine here. Not a big fan of it, to be honest. If there was a hammer strength isolateral kind of equivalent, I'd use that. If you want to use dumbbells or a barbell, that's also fine. But I started using this exercise a couple of weeks ago just to give it a go, so I thought I'd see it through. But to be honest, I feel that there's a bit too much emphasis on the triceps. But basically for safety, I keep my hands in a neutral position, which I find sort of stops any kind of aggravation of the shoulder joint. Slight bend in the elbows at the top. Again, I don't want it to be so much of a tricep exercise as a front delt exercise or overall shoulder exercise. 4 seconds to raise the weight, 4 seconds to lower the weight as per usual. And one of the things I want to talk about is when you do start using cadences, which is one of the sort of basic ingredients of most high intensity training programs, it really is a skill and a discipline to learn to lift under control. A lot of people find it easy to pulse the weight up, surge the weight up using momentum and then let it fall. But if you really want to get a good workout, if you want to be able to count your reps objectively, using a cadence really is the secret sort of formula to good technique. It's both safer on the joints and it'll take your target muscles to failure. Anytime you sort of try to rush things, you end up throwing a bit of body English into the movement and you'll take away from your objective muscles. Okay, we're on to the leg press now. This is a wonderful overall mass builder for the lower body. Hits the quads, hits the hamstrings, hits the glutes. Very good exercise. I alternate this exercise with the deadlifts, but obviously the deadlifts mainly hit the sort of backside or the posterior chain of muscles, whereas the leg press, apart from hitting those muscles, will also be a very heavy quad driver. So this exercise is sort of focusing on the quads more than anything, with obviously a lot of overall effect. My deadlift focuses on the backside of the legs and the lower back, etc. So because of a change in work roster and because I wanted to sort of get the B split, up and running as soon as possible for everyone to see, I filmed only about 5 days after filming the A split, and I've compromised my recovery significantly. So one of the things with HIT training is it's all about training hard to failure with a few basic exercises, and then you just need to wait enough time so that you recover your strength and then you get a little bit stronger. And it's only at that point where you're fully recovered and super compensated should you be working out again. Now, what I've done by cutting my rest time, 3 or 4 days, going from, 8 days of rest to only 5 days of rest, I've managed to go backwards 3 or 4 reps in this exercise. So I think it's about 260 kilos on the machine there, and I usually get 13 or 14 reps. But this week I've only managed to get 9 reps with the same form. So that's telling me that everything I understand about high intensity training, about the importance of recovery, that is the time spent resting outside of the gym, is absolutely fundamental for long-term progress. Now, beginners will probably be able to get away with training more often because they just can't handle the weight and damage themselves like someone who's sort of intermediate like I am. But it's very obvious to me, and I've confirmed it sort of scientifically, that 5 days of rest for this particular workout split, training to failure, is not enough time for me to make progress. I need to have 8 or 9 days of rest so that I can continually improve, at least when it comes to my leg development. So we're on to the home straight now. I've hacked this leg press machine to train calves. I find that this exercise is a fair bit better than using something like a traditional standing calf raise machine, which puts a whole lot of weight onto loading the spine up. When you're picking exercises, you really want to look at risk-reward scenarios and you want to look at longevity. So I reckon this exercise does nothing to compromise my calf training, but it does a whole lot to avoid damaging my back long term. If I was loading up a standing calf raise, each and every rep would be sending a fair bit of weight down through the spinal column and compressing on the discs. And it's probably not such a problem for young, healthy, fit people, but in the fullness of time, that's going to have effects and consequences. So if you really want to be in good shape and keep that shape for as long as possible into your twilight years, you really want to pick exercises at the beginning of your weightlifting career that you can keep doing long term and that get all the benefits of weight training but minimize some of the risks. So things like joint health and spinal health are something that should really be in the forefront of your training routine design. So the rep range is 12 to 20 like most lower body exercises, the exception of course being last week's deadlift, which I keep the reps low for that exercise. But with this exercise, I've switched it up and I'm using a 2-2-2 cadence, and that's something I typically kind of do with exercises that have a small range of motion. So it would be quite impractical to spend 4 seconds to raise and lower the weight for this exercise. So I halve everything down, but I still keep that 2-second static contraction, which is really the most effective part of any rep with a loaded static position. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like, share and subscribe. You've now got the A and B split, so get working out and try out this new full body routine.